CB, Dr. CB.
Yo, Dunny, we back in Le Chateau, and it's been a minute.
I mean, you're here every day.
I'm here every day.
A lot of days.
But in this context, with microphones and recording, dropping pod, It's been a while, man.
You're here 5 days a week, 17 days a month, 14 days a year.
14 days a year. Come on. I once heard it said that absence makes the heart grow fonder.
Are you talking about the podcast?
Yeah. Do you think our listeners are already regretting that we're back?
I know. I don't know how that saying relates to that because it'd mean they missed it.
Yeah, it'd be like, oh, I missed those guys. But then as soon as we're back, right, then they're kind of like, what did I miss?
Yeah. Just in terrible. The 47 seconds that we've started now.
Yeah. I think they have already reached that point. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
I mean, you're not wrong.
It might have been sooner than 47 seconds.
You're not wrong.
Oh, man. But it's good to be back.
It is good to be back. It's man, it felt good. We had an interview today. That felt so great. I'm looking forward to introducing that. But we've had a lot of things going on otherwise that have taken time away from our opportunity to do this.
Yeah, no doubt. One thing that's been super cool is Tad's Emerging World.
Tad's Emerging World. How about Don Kish, Sierra Murrieta, and crew?
And crew. Et al.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. They are doing the dang thing. They're on their way to Banff right now as we're recording, correct?
Yeah, on their way to Banff. And then Salt Lake, they're taking the film to the masses.
Yeah, totally. It's so cool. And a couple weeks ago, we were able to host a screening with Canyon Coolers and Mother Road Brewing and Fratelli's.
Yeah,
at the Canyon Cooler warehouse, where she showed Tad's Emerging World, and then was able to talk about it. And such a neat experience.
Yeah, it was an exclusive showing for the Flagstaff community.
Yeah,
it turned out great. It's a good vibe in there, huh?
It was a great vibe, and it was great to hear Dawn kind of talk about her process and experience with the film, in addition to what she shared on the pod, but take questions and answers for the people who had shown up. Yeah.
Such a great piece of work that addresses our area here.
Yeah, for sure. So if you haven't had a chance, one, you can check out the podcast with Don Kish, or two, make sure you go check out Tad's Emerging World, which you can Google or find on the IG.
Yeah. Check that out. I'm not sure where it'll be released. So she had the showing that was going on during Banff. Hopefully you voted for her. And then, I think from there they'll decide where it's shown, where else it's shown.
Yeah. Hopefully next will be the Global Film Fest, the GFF.
Cannes?
Cannes, is that the GFF? Global Planetary Film Fest?
Cannes is like the big one in France? Or
Francois.
Somewhere?
Europe?
Yeah, that's the one over in Francois.
Oui. Croissant.
Yeah. He's just a multilingual.
Man.
Just a real piece of work.
POW? That's for sure.
Okay. All right. What do we got on the docket for today?
We got good stuff. We're going Beyond Flag. First time in a while. Going Beyond Flag with Adrian Herder, who is the marketing and media manager for the nonprofit organization TNA, which is the acronym for 3 Navajo words that translate into Sacred Water Speaks. Adrian is from the Black Mesa region of the Navajo Nation and currently resides in Flagstaff. He served as a volunteer with TNA for 7 years before officially joining the team in 2020. In 2017, he graduated from the Northern Arizona University.
Yeah, go
Fumble-lax, yeah. Harvard of the West, come on. He earned his Bachelor of Science in Fitness and Wellness. In addition to all this, he's an accomplished potter and artist, showing his work in several notable shows and art markets. He's designed many flyers, posters, and logos for businesses and organizations. And then outside of TNA, Adrian likes to run, take photos of Diné life, and dedicate his time to making traditional Diné pottery.
Yeah. So in this interview, we covered a lot of cool things. We covered Adrian's work with TNA and the important work that organization is doing through education while simultaneously holding Peabody Coal accountable for the harm they've caused to Navajo land and the people. We also discussed his connection to his home in Hardrock and Flagstaff and get into the topic of how he fell into the position of becoming a race director for the event Rezduro, which was featured in the film The Trails Before Us, and premiered at the Flagstaff Mountain Film Festival this past spring.
Blammo.
Yeah. Boy, how would you like that to fall into becoming a race director?
Yeah, I don't know if that's for me.
Yeah. Everyone should check out that film, though, The Trails Before Us.
Trails Before Us.
Well, thank you so much for joining us as we go Beyond Flag with
Adrian Herder. Welcome to Beyond Flag, a Beyond the Pines production, created by, with, and for the people of Flagstaff, building connection in the town we love. We are your hosts,
Dr. Daniel J. Phillips
and Cody Bayless, also known as Dr. Chinchilla Nice Nice. Thanks for tuning in as we go Beyond Flag, straight from the dunny of our observatory.
All right. Well, Adrian Herder, we're happy to have you here today. Welcome. Yeah, would you be willing to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning. Hello, my name is Adrian Herder. Chishit the netin shle tlislana bashishin tilt ki ani itashe do tsetish itashnale she le tlitlin dopo on it isatena sha tsadel don wutle ado kade kuchekin tlana de kekwinste ado akwadishnanish akot egot nen shle. Hello everyone, good morning. My name is Adrian Herder. I'm from the community of Hardrock, located on Black Mesa, and I currently reside here in Flagstaff, where I also work here in Flagstaff, and in that way, I am Diné.
And what is it that you do for work here in Flagstaff?
So I work for the nonprofit Tó Nizhóní Ání, which translates to Sacred Water Speaks, and we are a Navajo nonprofit that recently acquired a space here in Flagstaff, and so we eventually took upon ourselves to have an office here in Flagstaff, as well as our own remote places out on Black Mesa. So yeah, I'm the media organizer for Tó Nizhóní Ání, and I cover our social media and any media related to our organization. And yeah, I just recently started back in 2020, right when the pandemic was going on. So that's kind of where I started, and I've always been involved with the organization, but like just as growing up with it, seeing the things done, the protests we've been involved with, and then now to actually be as an organizer, that's kind of where I am here. And eventually, with the recent acquisition of the office space here in Flagstaff, eventually I moved from my home community of Hardrock back into Flagstaff.
So what does your job look like then? What kind of job tasks do you have as a social media or as the media organizer?
Of course, it's like a desk job. So I sit at the desk and I monitor our social media, and also my phone. I look at my phone, and I review our social media, our social like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and things like that. And then also with that, I have a little social media or like a media campaign called Voices from Black Mesa. And this was a media campaign that we recently started like last year. And the idea of that, it just came about when we were talking, our executive director mentioned we should interview this person, and you should get this person's like interview just to kind of get it out there, like especially their take on what's happening right now. So eventually that happened, and then eventually the idea of like creating the Voices from Black Mesa kind of came out of that. And so at first we were just looking at just interview this person, and so eventually we got the idea of why don't we call it like a series, like Voices from Black Mesa. That way we highlight different voices, different people from the community that call Black Mesa home. And for those that aren't familiar with Black Mesa, it's located on the central agency side of the Navajo Nation. So like the middle part of the Navajo Nation, it's like a large landmass, a plateau / mesa, and it houses about, along with the Hopi tribe, it also has 7 Navajo chapter communities. And so my community of Hardrock is one of those 7. And so that's pretty much where we decided, like, not everybody knows about Black Mesa. Not everybody is familiar with like the livelihood that people live up there, because a lot of times when people hear about Black Mesa, they're like, oh man, that's like, those people are really like roughing it up there. And it's kind of like where it's, I would have to say, honestly, it's probably one of the communities up there on Black Mesa. We are one of the last remaining remote rural communities, and so a lot of that you got a really good understanding of tradition, language, and culture. It's somewhat still intact within these communities up on Black Mesa, and so it's a lot different than other communities off Black Mesa in bigger towns on Navajo and things like that. And so that's one thing my boss, our executive director, Nicole Horseherder, she mentioned that we should highlight these voices to get people to be familiar with the people that come from this region. I mean, this guy I interviewed yesterday in the community of Pinon, he had a lot of really good things to say, and the one takeaway he just kind of said was like, you know what, I kind of wish my kids were asking these questions. He said, I wish that my kids were asking me, hey dad, what's the history of this area? Hey dad, who is this person? Why are they important in our family? And he said, and for him, he's kind of just relying on that Navajo mentality where, like, if you're not asking for it, then you're not going to get it. So meaning, like, if you're not going to ask what are the stories, I'm not going to tell you the stories. And if nobody asks me about these things, then I'll just take it to my grave. And it's kind of, that's kind of detrimental to our way of life. I mean, that's a mindset that a lot of our people have. I mean, which they should be, but at the same time, it can do some damage because, like, you're taking these stories, these customs with you instead of sharing it. At the same time, our youth should also be asking these questions. And so I was like, oh man, and I just told him, I said, I hope one day one of your kids ask you, what's the history of Pinon? How did we get the high school here? How did we do this? And then, of course, hopefully he's still around to tell them. And so that's kind of where our voices from Black Mesa, we're hoping that people catch on to say, like, oh, I didn't know that, like, there was uranium mining that happened in the Blue Gap community. Like, honestly, I had no idea that happened until, like, a couple of years ago. Like, I was not familiar with the uranium. I just thought coal was the only issue on Black Mesa. But before coal was uranium. And that was in a certain community on Blue Gap. And so that's just kind of one thing that we, for this media campaign, it's just kind of like looking at different people's perspectives on their life, how they went about their lives on Black Mesa. Not that we want to bring up a lot of the traumas and kind of like bring up the sob stories, but just kind of like also looking at the resiliency of our communities, our people, and like how they're able to manage.
Yeah, I was wondering, in conducting those interviews and learning from the stories, did you find any common themes in the resiliencies of the stories that you would hear?
Yeah, I would say, I guess the resiliency would probably have to be how a lot of us have managed to go without limited water. So that's kind of like one of the common things I've noticed with a lot of them is that a lot of them would talk about, like, I grew up getting water here, there was water here, but of course none of that is available here. And so that was really interesting. And of course, a lot of us have to adapt to that. Like, our original water sources, which were like springs up there, are all gone. Most are gone. And so only certain ones remain. But what are communities doing now to kind of hang on to that? And so that's pretty much where it's like you get different viewpoints. Like, for example, some of these people, like the shepherds, the sheep herders, they mentioned, like, yeah, we do rainwater catchment. We collect the snow and we melt it, and we kind of have that as like to give water to our livestock, as compared to trying to travel into the local watering facility, which is usually in our chapter house communities. For us, it's about 50 miles away, traveling in there to haul water and then bring that back to our area. Of course, it's not free. We have to pay for that. And it's just kind of like just different ways people are still trying to cope. But I'm not saying that we're all like, everything is all like perfect up there. It's just kind of people finding their ways to adapt to this, I guess, future that we're pretty much heading towards. And so that's really pushes for us as an organization to continue our work, because we do, like, our main focus, right? I mean, our foundation is water protection, and that was a huge part of where we were established as an organization. And so to see these different stories from people that mention water, we don't have water in these areas, or we're trying our best to protect these infrastructures that are set in place with water, where water comes out, or like seeps or springs, or we're trying to kind of safeguard these areas because if it's not, they could be easily damaged. And so like if people aren't aware of that, then they're just going to damage it, and eventually we could lose that. And so but it's really interesting. A lot of people they probably don't see it, but I see it. It's just like for them to be really like proud of where they come from, especially on the Black Mesa region. It's like, it's a really beautiful region. Like as I get older now, I like driving through different communities. I guess the joys of me doing this media project is I get to see different places on Black Mesa.
Yeah, in what ways has it increased your connection to Black Mesa?
I would have to say it's really like, I mean, some of these places, like I've always like, when I would drive into the like communities or whatever, I'd be like, I wonder what's back there. Mm-hmm. Like what's over there? And at one point I got to go to a place where I was kind of curious about, like I even interviewed this one woman. She was a classmate back in the day. I hate to say female, but she was a classmate. And like I wasn't really familiar with where she lived, but I know she lived in a certain area I've never been to. And I know she always posts about stories about her on her social media. And I was like, it'd be really interesting to see like what she has to say. Because I think I found out eventually that she's fluent in Navajo. And I was like, wow, that's really rare to find. I mean, up on Black Mesa, it's kind of a little bit more common than most places. But for me, I was like, wow, I didn't know you were fluent in Navajo. And just kind of hearing her story was really amazing. Kind of like her push was like, I live up here with my grandma. My mom lives over here, but I stay here with my grandma. This is kind of where we're from. And we all grew up here. And this is the Navajo name in these places. And so I think for me, the takeaway is learning place names. Mm-hmm. That's a huge thing because like for me, I always ask, what is this place called? Like, what is this place called in Navajo? And they would tell me this is that. And there's one thing that like my grandma once said. She was like, these places have names. Like the land has names. These names refer to the significant things in the area. And so I think for me, that was a big thing, is to learn these place names. That way, let's say, for example, I'm traveling with my parents or somebody, that place is called this. And it's really important to know these place names because a lot of that ties back into the stories in the communities, maybe the ceremonies that come in. Like I collected plants at this mountain or this hillside, this wash, this valley, this region. And then for you to, if you were to know that name, it's over here. And it's really, in a way, it kind of really helps us keep that language going, because then if you know the Navajo names, it's really, it's perfect. So that's the takeaway. It's just kind of seeing different places that I've never been, hearing people's stories, different clan groups' stories of what they have in the area, their perspectives. And it's just really different because, again, like I'm just still trying to navigate, like figuring out where do people live in this community? Where are the clan groups in this community? How did you all as a clan group get here? Because you've got a lot of different clan groups in the community. In our community, we've got, I'm Diné, which is Chiricahua Apache, but I'm fourth Force Navajo. So it's a clan group. And it's just kind of, people ask like, well, how did you all get up there? Like our community has the largest population of Diné people, or their second clan is Chishi, or their third clan is Chishi, or their grandparents were Chishi or whatever. And it's just kind of like, well, I'll tell you what I know, but it's not the story for everybody. And so I'll just tell you what I know. And so that's kind of one thing I always ask, like, who's from this community? Is your mom from here? Is your dad from here? They're like, my mom, my aunt, or my dad's from this community. My mom's from this community. Okay, where is your grandma from? Your maternal grandma, she's from here, but we moved here. And it's just really interesting because that's kind of like your place name, like where you come from. And I don't know, I just like talking about place names and where people are from.
Yeah, having the name for something helps to feel connected to it by knowing the story or the history or what was in that area.
What has it been like moving to Flagstaff?
Well, I've lived here before. The first time I moved here was back in 2014. So I was on the res, I was going to school at tribal college, and eventually I left that. And then, I don't know, I was confused with my financial aid. I really had no understanding of how it all worked. So I thought I only had a limited amount of time to use that financial aid to get a bachelor's. And so I was still working on my AA. And then, I don't know, I was just like, took a year off from school. You know what? I think I'm going to go to Flagstaff. I'm not a big fan of the heat down south. I don't do the big city. That's just not something for me. So eventually I was like, let me try Flagstaff. But I had no idea how expensive it was. And so I came here, moved in with my sister, and I was going to the community college in 2014 at CCC. Did that, and eventually I was from here in Flagstaff from 2014 to 2017 when I graduated from NAU. So I got my bachelor's there at NAU, graduated, stuck around for a little bit, a couple of months, and eventually I found work back on home in Pinon. So I moved back to Pinon, taught there at the local high school, coached there as well. For about 2 years, and then eventually pandemic hit, and that's when I left. And then this job came up for Tó Nizhóní Ání. It just kind of came up in 2020. So I came back. I wasn't really planning on it. Sometimes, for me, I really feel like I don't really like to go back to places I've already been to. So I was just like, I don't know about moving back to Flagstaff. It's a nice place. It's expensive, but I was like, because my memory here was back in 2016, I believe, I actually slept in my ride for a couple of months because we moved out of my sister left her, she got her degree. She was moving out of her place. She was going back home after she got her degree. And so me and my sister were we didn't even plan to figure out our housing after this. So she had some friends in town, so she stayed with them. And I didn't want to ask anybody. I didn't want to ask family that was here, hey, can I surf, couch surf or whatever. I didn't say anything. I was like, you know what? I have a ride. I have a part-time job that has a kitchen there. I was like, you know what? I'll just sleep in my ride. So I slept in my ride for 2 months, October into December. And yeah, it was, luckily my brother gave me, I think it's called Beef. I don't know if that's the brand that, sleeping bag, really heavy duty, that down one. He just bought it and he's like, here, well, he had it. And then he just like, here, you want a sleeping bag? And I was like, yeah, I'll take it. And so eventually that's what was my saving grace.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So when it came time to come back, you're like, I don't know if I'm down for that.
Yeah, I was like, I don't know. I'm not really, my memory of Flagstaff was different because it was rough. Yeah. It was as a college student, you're struggling, and especially as a minority, it's different. It's you really have to worry about money and food, whereas some folks kind of just have the luxury of I'll just call up mom or dad and, hey, can you guys send me some money, whatever. But for me, I knew that was not the case. I was I don't want to reach out to parents because they've already got the farm to hold down at home. And so eventually that's where I was you know what, I'm not going to ask anybody. I'm just going to try and do it myself. And I have a ride. I'll sleep in my ride. And so that's kind of what I did for a while. Anyways, so I came back to Flagstaff, and I like it. I mean, now that I've actually got an adult job, it's a little bit more bearable. Yeah, I'm enjoying my time. It's just, I could say the pandemic really threw a lot of us off. And so I think I feel like a lot of us are slowly trying to get back to the quote unquote normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, the look on your face when you said October through December, it's these two dudes are going to think I'm going to say June and July. But
no, October to December. Oh man, I'm glad
at least it's not through. January to February. That's cold. That's cold. That's because bitter. I know one morning, I think it was in December, because I was staying, because I was like, you know what, I need to stay until I finish my semester here at CCC in White Fall. So then eventually, December, I remember one morning, it was pretty cold, and I usually just got in my ride, found the parking spot, went to sleep, and then one morning I woke up and there was just snow. I was like, whoa. And every morning, especially when it started getting really cold, it would be I would wake up and there would be frost everywhere, all around the windows, so everything would be frosted. And then one morning I woke up and it was when I turned on my ride to heat it up, that probably is not something I should have done, but should be doing, but I turned on my ride to let it warm up while I'm in there. And I remember, I looked at the little whatever temperature thing gauge, and it was -3. Oh, no. I was like, what? I was like, this can't be right. I mean, I don't know. I was just like, that's crazy. So I just crawled back into my sleeping bag, closed everything up, and just waited till the ride warmed up. all right, it's warm enough. I get out, change my clothes. All right, I'm going to go to campus now. So I go to my job, which was at CCC as well. Just go to the lounge area where I have my stuff, eat breakfast, chill there, and then go to like work.
Well, thank goodness for that sleeping bag. Tell your brother thanks. It made me wonder this whole path. Like you said, you're learning the media stuff, but also that you've learned enough as an organization that sometimes you guys are giving tips to other people. And so it made me wonder, on your personal path, how did you end up at the point that you were?
So with our organization, it's kind of like a family. We're all a family here. So we're familiar with everything going on. So, for example, Nicole's mom and my mom are sisters. Yeah, so we kind of grew up with this organization. And so Nicole, of course, was the one at the lead of all of it. So we just knew, Tó Nizhóní Ání. It's kind of like we're familiar with it as a family because Nicole's the one that started it, and we grew up going to protests, things like that. We kind of were familiar with the movement, what was going on, because of course it's happening in our own communities. And so before we moved to Flagstaff, their office, we pretty much had our office was our own homes at home. So that's kind of was like really interesting to have an organization like of ours. It's different because we actually were out there in our community. We actually were in our area. And so we kind of operated out of our own homes. And when we advocated, we knew what we were kind of familiar with because we all grew up. Like a lot of us out there, we still don't have running water. We have electricity, but no running water. And so we grew up like knowing the necessities of how important water is, how to get it, how to process it, or where to get it from. What happens if this place isn't having water? Where do you go next? And so we kind of were off from this. So we got that understanding of how important water is. And then eventually with water advocacy, the organization, we eventually were able to progress. Now with the media component, I guess I've always just been like fascinated with like the idea of storytelling and like design as well, like creating, I guess, designing things and storytelling, telling our perspectives as our area, because a lot of times a lot of people kind of they've seen me on social media and they think like I'm a traditional person. I mean, kind of, but I don't say I'm traditional that much. I'm not fluent, but I should be. I should have been fluent given how we grew up, where we grew up. But of course, that wasn't how it really happened. But so it's just kind of like just the idea of storytelling, because a lot of times people didn't grow up the way a lot of us did in our area. Like I would say the biggest culture shock experience I've ever had, which is pretty funny, it's kind of nuts, is that so our community of Hardrock is here, and our biggest community is Piñon. And that was my first culture shock experience, is that I moved into the community of Piñon because my sister at the time, she worked for the school, so she had teachers housing. So we kind of moved in with her in her house. There was a lot of us in there. And that was like kind of like really my first experience, like growing up with running water. Right there, it was like my senior year. It's like, whoa, we have a bathtub in this house. It was just like mind-blowing for me, because we're like, we usually don't get this experience until we go off the res. Like our family, ourselves, we go off and stay someplace like this. And I was like, it was really interesting because I was like, it doesn't feel like you're on the res. Like this is a really nice community, the teachers housing in Piñon, and it's got these nice, I don't know, like community village, whatever, teachers housing. Anyways, that was like really mind-blowing, like whoa. And then eventually like just kind of having bashes right down the road, subway, gas station, laundromat. It was like, whoa, this is weird. It was really culture shock. And then eventually I realized, like growing up, I thought a lot of kids grew up the way I did. I thought everyone grew up with no running water, all your siblings and family living in a one-room house. You all like having sheep, livestock, herding sheep, growing your own produce, butchering your own meat and things like that. And just kind of having the land base. I thought everybody grew up like that. Eventually, I remember one time my sister made a joke. She was like, we were so poor that we had our own food to grow, and we also had our own mutton to butcher. She's like, that's how poor we were. We were laughing because now, like, you think about it, that's like, I don't know, I don't hate to say trending, but that's kind of like people are like, oh, like your own produce, organic, whole foods. It's like, shoot, we grew up with that, but people said we were poor. But so that just kind of the idea of storytelling, that was kind of the thing, is that I realized that at first I was ashamed of it. Like, nobody grew up like this. And eventually not everybody grew up like this. And that's kind of where the idea of storytelling is to say, all right, this is our corn produce. This is kind of how my mom prepares it to make certain traditional foods. This is where we go to herd sheep, or this is kind of how we herd sheep. This is how the butchering process is, or this is like our earthenwork gabions that we do while we're out herding sheep, things like that. And that's just kind of what the idea for me with like storytell. And eventually I carried that somewhat into the work for Tó Nizhóní Ání, because for me as the media organizer, I feel like my job is, of course, our job as an organization, as a nonprofit, is we're like the middleman. We are trying to convey this technical information that's out there. Like, for example, maybe like water hydrology. How do we transfer that into a Navajo to make it more digestible for our own communities? Because that's kind of was our major role with when it was first created, our organization. Our founder, Nicole and Marshall, that was their major job, because a lot of it was like when it came to the hydrology of the aquifer, they had to create terms at some point. They had to figure out, how do you say this term? How do we describe this? Because it's really complex, and we need to change it into Navajo to make it more digestible for our communities, because they're not going to understand the English component of it. And so that's where the organization, we were kind of like the middle person to like, how do we transfer this to make it more digestible to the community here? And that was their main goal, was to do that. And I think at that time it was not really, I mean, today it's kind of not as, people still don't do it, but that was a big thing, is that they were out there in the communities, out there at chapter meetings to talk about water hydrology. What is the impact of mining to our area? How does it impact, like you all have seen it out there. Because a lot of times, like one time I had a friend, he was telling me, oh, we're not impacted by coal mining. And he's from like a different region on Black Mesa. And then I said, yeah, you are. I said, why are all these horses coming to your area? And he's, oh, because we have a spring here. But why? Why can't they go somewhere else? Why can't they go to that one over there? Oh, because that one doesn't work anymore. That spring is gone. And why is that spring gone? Because it dried up. If you look at this study, this kind of the correlation between mining and the aquifer, you are a coal impacted community. And he was just like, oh, I didn't think about that. I was like, yeah, so a lot of us, when we talk about water here on Black Mesa, that pretty much makes us a coal impacted community. And so anyways, that's just kind of like the work of like trying to make the connections for our community members to say, this is kind of one of the reasons why we're advocating for this, and transferring the information to make it more digestible for communities. And so that's where I feel like it's also my job as a media organizer, is to kind of talk about like to make this information more accessible to folks. Like, for example, bond release. Like, not everyone knows what bond release is. What's a bond? What does it mean to be released?
What does bond release mean? Because these companies are trying to get out of any responsibility for cleaning up.
So bond release, what it is pretty much the company is trying to relinquish itself from being bound to the work of coal mining, or of restoring the land to that area. And so once they say, okay, we did reclamation, we did reclaim the land, look, it meets all the requirements, check. Now it goes to, we're up for bond release. And so it's pretty much a process. The last person to sign off on that application is BIA. So BIA is the one that eventually looks at everything. Okay, everything meets the requirement, we're going to sign off on it. That land eventually now goes back to the Navajo Nation. So it goes back to the tribe that it was pretty much used or whatever. So that's pretty much what bond release is that they're trying to relinquish themselves from the duty and obligation to reclamation or the land. And eventually, once it gets approved, it meets all the requirements, it goes back to the Navajo Nation. Now, the families that used to reside in the area before they were moved or before it got changed, they kind of get access back to that. And so that's, for us as an organization, that's pretty much where the issue is that again, you're going back into that being the middleman. We're trying to advocate, also amplify some of the voices of these people in these communities. to say, because a lot of times we hear is that like them saying we were not consulted when it came to reclamation. The seeds that were planted here, the way these things were changed, we were never consulted about it. And so that's pretty much where we try and work with Navajo Nation to say, hey, we have community concerns here, and what's being done about these communities' voices. Like right now, before these lands get returned to them, they need a say in how they want it restored. Why aren't they being included in these discussions? Because we had a mine site tour last year of these certain areas that were going up for bond release, and we joined them, and just one of the local community members just happened to be in the area, like right in that office area. And then she asked, what's going on here? And then eventually they told her, oh, we're going on a mine site tour. And she's like, okay, I want to go. And they're like, okay, yeah. And so then eventually she got on board. And then the one interesting thing she said was that she's like, you know what? And there was like officials from Navajo Nation, Office of Surface Mining and Reclamation. There was Navajo Minerals Department. They were there. The people that are overseeing this operation as well from the Navajo Nation component. And then we had officials from OSMRE, Office of Surface Mining, Reclamation and Enforcement. They were there as well. And so they were just kind of talking, this is what we've done to the area, this is what we've done here, and this and that. And that local community member, she was like, you know what? This is the first time I'm seeing any of you. She's like, this is the first time I'm seeing any of you in this area driving around. And this is the first time I'm being included in this. She said, I live right there, and I oversee, this used to be my grazing area, right where it got taken out. This whole mining happened. She said, this is the first time I've ever been here seeing any of you all. And she's like, what does that show, like our involvement as community members in this reclamation process? And it's a tough situation, the whole reclamation component of it. It's like, I mean, just the way it's going about, because Office of Surface Mining Reclamation Enforcement, they go with government like interactions, or it has to be from the Navajo Nation. They don't really work. I mean, they said that it's not community to OSM. It's more of like Navajo Nation to OSM. So we have to go through the Navajo Nation to that government to government process. And that the hard part, and that's kind of just showed that one of the community members just said, I've never seen any of you Navajo Nation officials here before. And we're just like, I'm kind of glad you said that, because that's what they needed to hear, because they say, oh, well, we oversee this mine over in New Mexico too. Well, this mine, Black Mesa mine, is different because you actually have people that still live here. No other mine has people still living on the land, in that were probably just moved a couple of miles down the road or whatever, but it's still like people live here. Whereas typically when operations happen like this, you relocate people somewhere else. They get moved somewhere over here and the mining happens. But for this one, you still have families that live in and around the mine area. And so that was just really interesting to hear.
Well, it increases the importance that much to include those voices in what reclamation should look like. And so it's interesting. I don't know if this is happening, and I'm really curious to hear from you, but it's almost like those companies could say, oh, well, bond release is a benefit to you all because we're signing the lands back over to you. We've done everything. Don't you want the lands back? And that can be marketed as a really positive thing. But in the same right, they're actually releasing themselves over any obligation to actually incorporate feedback from people that know the area, that have histories about the area, that know what the area should actually look like in terms of the biodiversity and the land. And so it could be marketed one way, like, oh, we're honoring you by giving your land back. In actuality, they're actually releasing themselves from obligation to contribute to returning the land to what it was. Yep, that's true. Because like it's for these, like a lot of them, that's the biggest concern a lot of them had. Just recently, within like last month, we had a bond release hearing meeting that happened in the Forest Lake chapter community, which is on Black Mesa. Forest Lake chapter is the community that has its boundaries that go into the mine site area. Mm-hmm. So there are certain community members that live near the mine who are part of Forest Lake chapter. So we had like a bond release meeting there. And so that's where OSM came out with other officials, and Navajo Nation officials were there too as well, to kind of hear like on the people's comments, people's perspectives on bond release that was happening for these certain areas that were going out for bond release.
And I'm glad like we went out there thinking, okay, we need to like make sure that we hit these points if we're going to talk. And eventually when people were out there, like they just went ahead, like people were just they already started providing their comments, which was good because we were like, wow, this is exactly what, like maybe 20 years ago, this would have probably been a different case. This probably would have been different for folks to talk like this about bond release, about reclamation, about things like that. And so that's kind of where we were really happy to see people really outspoken to say, well, we don't want their bonds to be released because we still have the issue with water here. We still don't have windmills that happen in these areas. And so like a lot of them mentioned, there used to be a windmill here, there used to be a windmill here, there used to be a water source here, but all of that is gone. And so that's kind of a lot of their key concerns came up that way, was like saying, we don't want any of you all's the bonds to be released from, because we still have our needs that are not met here. There are areas that were really important to us, and the vegetation that is planted here, like they said, this our livestock don't eat this. Like, who is the one that authorized these seeds to be put here? What about the traditional seeds here? And with the reclamation, only 5% of that land base is dedicated to cultural plants. So they dedicated certain areas, certain patches where they're calling it like cultural sites, meaning that they're trying to reintroduce the plants that were there before, just in only 5%. And the rest of it is some kind of Midwestern grass that somebody said, like, we want our livestock to eat this. And a lot of them were just said that, like, our livestock aren't eating this. These things are just growing up and they die, and it's just an eyesore here. And the reclamation, they said it's just bad. And it was really, really good to hear, like, the community members all spoke up during that meeting. And so we, of course, as an organization, we were there, we documented that. And then we just observed as well. Nicole gave testimony, or she gave comments too as well here and there. And then, but yeah, it was really awesome to see the communities in that area really step, especially the Navajo women. I would say that meeting really showed the strength of Diné people is through our women. Because I was recording and I was watching. I said, all of these people that spoke here were all women. They were like the matriarchs, because we are a matrilineal society. And so everything runs through the female in the family. And so like the land base belongs to the women. And so it's really empowering to see that, because these are like, I guess you could say this has really showed like how aggressive, how stern that Navajo folks are, especially Navajo women. Like, this is our land base. This is our land. We've already had it torn up because of coal mining. Now you guys are planning to leave as Peabody. Why aren't you helping us get it getting it back to where it should be? And of course, we're not going to have everything, like everything's not going to be in place. You just disturb millions of years of geology, thousands, whatever of years of geology, but we at least want something that we can have. And so that was really empowering to see, like, a lot of the Navajo women just really like putting their foot down, because like, this is their land. They're going to have this for their kids in the future generation, their daughters too. And it was just like, I was like, wow, these ladies are they're really mean, but that's what we need.
Inspiring.
Yeah.
Not mean. Yeah. Just, standing up.
Resilient.
Yeah. That was Yeah, just I guess for me, Adrian, just listening to you, I want to clarify kind of the legacy of this, is I want to make sure I understand it, is Black Mesa has been inhabited for a very long time. And then settler extractive industry came in, set up mines, displaced people through forest removals, pulled coal out of the earth, and then transported that coal one way, and then transported another way over to Navajo Generating Station, is that what it was called, in Page, and would burn that coal for energy in the Southwest. And then as coal energy has been reduced over time, Peabody Coal is kind of the main company associated with this. And so then I guess the way I understand it, I want to make sure I understand this correctly, is that they've just kind of left. It's like they did all this damage, taken off, and now they're just trying to get off the hook for it, in a sense.
Yeah, that's the main thing, is that they're done. They filed for bankruptcy. The mines have shut down. Right now they're slowly making their way out. And their last hook is that their last, I guess, ball and chain, quote unquote, is the reclamation. Like they're still bound to that area, but through reclamation. And their last way out is that bond release, and so that's where they're putting up. So right now they're submitting their applications for bond release, and that's where OSM is kind of the one that oversees that and makes sure everything is going right, and then eventually they give it to OSM or BIA, and BIA finally signs off it, and they're out of here. And so that's that's exactly it. It's like they're trying to make their way out, but we're pushing for that. No, they still have a lot of work to do. And the one thing was really interesting to hear. A lot of people, they said, I don't think they should ever be released. They said there's a lot more work that needs to be done here. A lot of them people say, you won't see the changes until like 10 years down the road. Well, let's keep them there. Keep them until we actually see these changes. And that was really interesting to see, because a lot of them said, well, we might never get these things back. So what happens then? And like especially the land base, like these things might change. Like what happens once they get relinquished? Who do we go to next? Like who do we say, hey, we need this, needs to be adjusted, changed. The land, the plant, whatever, these plants are all gone. They're all dying off after like 10 years. What happens next? And that was a really interesting thing. I'm glad they all brought those points up, because then that really kind of said, this is the community's perspective on bond release. They said, no, they should not be relinquished of these bonds.
Yeah. I was just going over the mission of TNA, and it says our mission is to protect the water of Black Mesa from industry use and waste. We work to bring power back to our indigenous communities impacted by coal, and our work is rooted in protecting our water. Water is life. And it seems that maybe the mission of what you're doing is that very thing, is trying to hold Peabody Coal accountable in a sense for what they've created. And you mentioned earlier that storytelling and design come together for you. And I was wondering, you said that the design behind the TNA logo was sort of your concept or your idea. And I was wondering if you could speak to it a little bit or share the idea of the design for your logo.
So for us as a family, I would say the design first started with the water wave. So you can kind of see there's a water wave here. That was a traditional design done by my grandma. She actually lived to be 102. And she passed back in 2009 when I was at my senior year of high school. So she did the water wave. That was kind of more iconic thing that she would weave, and my mom weaved it. My other aunts did too. And so that, I would say, when I was designing this, Nicole mentioned I want the water wave in it. And so that's kind of where we decided, okay, this is my starting off point, because the water wave goes back to our work of the water work we do on Black Mesa. And so eventually I put that there. And then eventually we realized, why don't we kind of mimic like what we see for Black Mesa. And so that's where we have the Black Mesa here, the in aquifer is underneath Black Mesa. And then she said that I also want we're rooted in tradition in our ceremonies and prayers. And that's where she said, I want corn stalks. And so that's where the corn stalks came in, because for us, corn is very essential to our way of life, food, medicine, and also we use it for ceremonies and other things. And so that's where we wanted the corn stalk. And then the roots. So the roots pretty much meaning that we're grounded in culture. That's kind of ceremony, prayers. That is our foundation as well, is that the corn represents that, and it's rooted in Black Mesa. And like I mentioned, we're probably one of the few remaining communities that still have a large population of native speakers, like for younger folks. Of course, you got a lot of native speakers everywhere, but Black Mesa region is really high in language and culture because we're so remote. And so that kind of plays to that, is that we're rooted in culture, language, and that's kind of where the roots show that keeps Black Mesa strong, is the roots of language and culture. And then also the here are dragonflies. And so that's where Nicole, she loves dragonflies. And she said the reason being is that dragonflies are always around water. And that's kind of the connection there, is that they're beautiful beings that you see around water. And so that's where we wanted the dragonflies, the cornstalk, rooted into Black Mesa with the aquifer underneath. And so that just kind of, and then a lot of it is the circle. So we had a square design, but let's go with the circle, because that's kind of more symbolic of kind of the whole cycle, the whole thing as a whole. And at the top, you have the opening. So this is usually done for like a lot of traditional things, our baskets, designs, you always have an opening to the east because that's where the sun comes up. And so that's where the opening at the top kind of signifies that. And we're kind of going off of like the minimalist kind of style here. That's a huge thing because a lot of the designs that our moms or aunts do is almost like minimal. They don't try and do those really exaggerated like trading post style, what the traders wanted for us to weave. Instead, the ladies here in our area, they said, you know what? We don't want to go with the traders. We don't care what the traders didn't have a good legacy here in Navajo. We're not trying to appease what they think is sellable out there. I mean, it's probably sellable out there, but we're tired of that. We're going to weave what we see in our communities, what we see, what we want to weave. And that kind of, our design tells that story, is like a really minimal design, which kind of tells a story, which a lot of weavings do. They tell the stories, they kind of imprint what, like almost like a history of what's going on. And so that's kind of what we wanted to do with our logo, was we did that with Tó Nizhóní Ání, Sacred Water Speaks, established 2000. So yeah, that's the backstory on the logo there.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. Like, it just seems so rich in story and cultural connection.
Yeah. You knocked it out of the park. It looks great.
Yeah.
It looks great
And
aesthetically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I've had the opportunity to just have a couple of conversations with you, and I know you are so much more than just the work you're doing right now. Yeah, would you be willing just to touch on some of your personal interests and hobbies, like what makes you you?
Yeah. So I also do, outside of the work of TNA, I would say right now, what takes up outside of TNA is Rezduro. So I'm one of the co-founders and organizers of Rezduro, which is a mountain bike enduro race that takes place in our home community of Hardrock. And it's the first of its kind. We're the first indigenous-led mountain bike enduro race. And so that's really, really awesome to see. And I also do pottery, traditional Navajo pottery, and ceramic stoneware. And running-wise, I haven't done a whole lot of it recently. I'm still trying to get back into my running, but yeah, I do running here and there. Pottery, it's kind of on the hold right now, my traditional pottery. I've been so busy with TNA and Rezduro that pottery, I mean, I should be doing it because it would help me out.
Well, there's only 24 hours in
Yeah, you're right. So I just kind of put pottery on the hold, but that's another passion I like to do, especially working with your hands. That's a big thing. And clay, it's really goes well together. So I do that. And then ceramic stoneware, I think I'm going to start that in the spring at CCC. So I'm going to take a class there and start that up again. So I do that. And then running, I've always been a runner. Did that in high school, did that in college, and I've really enjoyed it. I haven't done a whole lot. I've actually slacked, packed on a couple of pounds, but now I'm like, you know what? I need to get back out there. But I might be shifting to mountain biking, I think, because that's, I mean, right now, like running, it's just like, oh, this is really, really tough to get back into. But, and then with the work of Rezduro, I think I've been really like inspired to get a mountain bike because like, I mean, I don't know. People just ask me, how are you an organizer of Rezduro and you don't mountain bike? I said, well, that's probably a good thing though. I said, because I'm asking questions as an outsider, somebody who has no idea in regards to safety, organizing, operation, venue, location. I said, I'm asking these questions as an outsider. And I feel like that has also been helpful on our end as organizers because I didn't really mountain bike. I mean, I have a road bike, but that's about it. And so it's just kind of like, for me, I was like, you know what? I think it's good that I don't mountain bike right now because I'm asking questions as like my perspective on organizing this. How do I go about this? How does this done? And so, so that's been Rezduro. It's been really awesome. We're on our second year. This year was our second year, Rezduro 2022. And we had a huge turnout. It's crazy because like originally this started out with just a little friendly competition amongst Nigel and his friends. He's like, you know what? Like, I want to have a race here, Mom. I want to have a race. I want to race with my friends. I have some trails that I had developed back here. I talked with Masana and Cheche, which is my mom and dad, his grandparents. I talked to my grandparents about it. They said, yes, I can do trails. So he did trails out there on the sheep herding trails, things like that. And eventually he said, I got the trails ready. I want to host a race in August. And eventually, like, honestly, I've seen Nigel do mountain bike and enduro racing here and there, some of it. And I just noticed, like, yeah, this is not really a diverse sport. You have to come from a place of privilege to have like the money, the resources to do it. And so I know Nigel's was fortunate enough to have that too as well. And so I was like, wow, okay. And then eventually he was like, oh, Nigel wants to do an enduro here. And at that time, I really had no idea what enduro was. I had to learn as I went. And that's kind of where I was brought in. And then his mom said, hey, can you design the logo? Can you design a flyer? Can you design this, whatever? She came to me just for the logo. Can you design a logo? I want to do shirts. I was like, okay, I'll get that done. I know I've done shirts before with TNA. I've done shirts whatever before, so I'm familiar with how to go about that. So I did the shirt stuff. And I said, okay, what about trail map? Or do you guys have like a course map? No. Okay, I'll make that too. So I made that one. And then I said, okay, what about this and that? They're like, can we do a backdrop too? And I was like, I don't know, we'll see. And eventually we started going, and that's kind of where I got tired. And okay, so what about safety? What are you guys gonna do about it? Because it was supposed to be a small little thing amongst friends, like no more than like 15 people. But eventually it turned into 55 people that came out, and that was crazy because it was so. If you were to be there for Rezduro 2021, it was just really really rugged.
Grassroots.
Yeah, really grassroots. And then this year was bigger. It was more organized. We had better like signage. We had sponsors that came through, and it was huge. And so it just felt like our first year. And it was really, I would say the big takeaway is that the reason that we continue to do this is that Jermaine recently said Rezduro is more like an identity right now, because we have other tribal nations looking to us. We're not affiliated with the Navajo Nation. Our Rezduro event, we're not affiliated with Navajo Nation. We're not sponsored by Navajo. They're not helping like really provide funding. But we're doing more of our own family. And a lot of people are looking to us, other tribal nations, to say, how did you all do Rezduro? Like, we want to know the backstory. Like, how did you all do this? We would like to do something similar. And we're just like, wow, we got other tribal nations who have the territory, who have the terrain perfect for enduro racing. It's like, and they're coming to us, some little dusty place in Arizona. And so that was really interesting. And then also just kind of like becoming like a beacon of like hope, or a beacon for like enduro racing for Native communities. Like I was thinking like Nigel, like it's crazy. He just went out and did it. He went and did these things. And I was like, just imagine if he had the training, if he had grew up with like doing more camps or whatever, he could have been good, but he didn't really want to go that route. And so it's just thinking, we've got a lot of kids out there who have the potential. It's just none of them have ever really tapped into it. And so that's kind of where Rezduro, we're really pushing for that, is like we want to create an avenue, almost like a venue for kids to try it out to see if they like it. If they do, they don't. If they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. That's fine. But just kind of bringing it home to our community, because Nigel at one point when he was out there, when I noticed, I was like, you're the only like person of color, the only Native out here. And that's kind of what he noticed. Like, yeah, I'm the only person of color Native out here. And it's just kind of, I'm like, I'm the only like oddball sometimes. And eventually he got in connection with other folks who were out mountain biking to other Navajos who were like, whoa, where are you from? Oh, I'm from Hardrock. Whoa, I didn't know you were like a mountain biker too. So eventually he made connection. And that's kind of where he was able to bring other mountain bikers together. And then with Rezduro, we had other mountain bikers come on Navajo to hear our community of Hardrock. And they were just like tripping out. They were like, I had no idea this was here in the middle of nowhere in the boonies. Like, you would think it'd be in a bigger town on Navajo. I don't know, but it's in a Hardrock. A small family put this on, and it's big. You've got big sponsors. You've got Osprey. You've got Imba. All these guys here, like, as sponsors, and they were just like, this is crazy. Like, I didn't think this was ever going to be possible. And so that was our big push as organizers, is that we want our people to feel proud, especially our Native youth, because I see that when we create our Rezduro merchandise, especially the word Rezduro, just the word itself is an identity. It's a statement there because it says Rez. Anybody who's not Native will say, oh, Rez, oh, that must be like some kind of Native stuff right there. So Rezduro. And it's, in a way, we've really like not marketed, but we've really like geared it towards our youth, because then they can feel proud to say, when they go to different enduros, hey, we have an enduro like that. We have an exact same race. It's called Rezduro. That's what we have on Navajo. And it's just something like for our Native youth to really be proud of, to say this we've done it, we can do it here in our own community. And so the beacon of hope for that as well. And also just kind of like bringing other folks into spaces like this that don't really feel like I don't want to say welcome, but they just don't feel like they're like the oddball. Like we've got a couple of folks who came out, they're just like, I'm so glad you guys are doing this, because anytime I go to other races, I'm always the only person of color. But here we got a lot of people of color here, and it's just really like empowering to see. And we're just so happy. We're just like, that's what we want to see, because like we're bringing like a space for native people of color. And of course it's all open to everybody, but the people that come here, they just kind of were like, this is really like empowering to see. Like we had they said, I've never been to a race where there were this many youth Grom show up for a race. And they were like, usually it's just always adult race, big guys going out there, the older guys doing this, but we've never been to a race where we had youth. And that's kind of where, for us, it was like, we did them a disservice. 2021, 2022, we're going to make it better. 2023, it's going to be better. It's going to be bigger.
Yeah. Oh, this is so, yeah, you've got my blood pumping. Like, I'm stoked. Yeah. And there's a film that documents a bit about some of the aspects of what you've shared about. Is it okay if I share that? Yeah, the trails before us. And so is it okay if we include a link to that?
Yeah, for sure.
You know, there's an interesting story. So, you know how YouTube will select videos for you. So one day, it was after you guys had done the film festival here in Flagstaff and everything, and I'd seen the film, but I got recommended that video through Specialized. The trails before us, and it had tons of views. I hadn't checked it recently, but it's like tens of thousands of views, isn't it? Wow.
Yeah, that was a good thing it launched on there, because before we kind of just kept it like it was only being viewed on like what was it, like film festivals, places like that. Mm-hmm. And eventually it made its way, and eventually Specialized released it on their YouTube, and we were like, whoa. And we actually had we got in connection with the high school, a local high school at Pinon, the JROTC. They actually, one of our other persons that we knew, why don't you ask JROTC to help you guys with like traffic control or whatever? So we brought them out, and eventually they saw the film. And then the instructor, Sergeant Jones, he emailed me. I worked with him when I was there at the high school, but he emailed me, and he was just like, hey, Mr. Herder, we still call him Mr. Herder. Hey, Mr. Herder. He's like, wow, I saw that film. And he said, it was amazing. Yes. He said, these guys are so pumped for this, because I told them we would like your help, your cadets. And he was like, these cadets are so pumped. They were so excited. And when they came out, of course, they came a little later, but it was better late than never. So they came, they helped us out. And before they left, because they couldn't stay, they had to go back and then come back again the next day. So they came over and was like, hey, before you all go, we'll give you guys some like sweaters, because we had sweaters that were donated to us from SRAM. Mm-hmm. So they came out and they had a bunch of sweaters. So we gave them all sweaters. We had hydro flasks that have also contributed to the event. We each gave them hydro flasks, and then they were just like freaking out. They were like, you know how expensive these things are? They're like, wow. And they were just like, they were so amazed. And then they went back, and then they came back the next day. They were all excited. They were just like, this is crazy. We were able to be a part of like, I don't know, this event. We saw the documentary with Nigel, and I think some of them kind of knew Nigel, because then he was a senior, but he didn't go to school. So eventually they were just like, whoa, this is Nigel. We went to school with him at one point.
Yeah. And he's a sponsored writer for Specialized. Mm-hmm. I'll explain to Cody later what enduro is.
All these terms are flying right over my head.
Yeah. You just have this energy and enthusiasm about you. To me, it's no question why you end up in the roles that you do, because you bring just such a passion and energy to it. So, we like to end with a question that we ask everyone, and it really is an open-ended question. It's geared for any answer that's just authentic. But how would you define Flagstaff? So in a couple of sentences, what is Flagstaff to you, or what does this area in northern Arizona mean to you?
Flagstaff, to me, it would mean a place of high elevation. It's a perfect place for running. And we also it's also home to one of our mountains here, Belko Sleep. And this mountain here is a very important mountain, especially in our creation story. And it's just really interesting just to see, like, I like Flagstaff. I mean, now that I've been here, it's a really nice place. It's used to be bigger when I was small, but now I'm like, oh, it's a pretty small town. But yeah, I like Flagstaff. I would say Flagstaff really, it's an awesome place. It's probably got one of the best views, night sky, and probably I've heard it's got also one of the cleanest air quality here as well, which is perfect. So yeah, Flagstaff, it just means a good place to be outdoors.
Yeah.
It's one of the reasons why I moved here, because I was like, I'm not going to do Phoenix. You only have to operate in a certain time of the day. Flagstaff is perfect. It's a little bit higher, more snow, but you've got places to do things. You've got the mountain there, the height. You've got Sedona right there. It's kind of a perfect spot. You've got a lot of like places to go here or near here.
Yeah, I guess just real quick, I just want to extend a very deep thank you for sharing your time with us today, your stories, your culture, and yourself with us. And I just want to say thank you so much for that gift.
Yes, thank you, Adrian.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for having me.
Wow. Adrian just left the joint. He's dropping knowledge.
Blammo. What a time, huh?
Oh, what a time. What a time indeed.
What a time indeed. That was a true joy to sit with Adrian today.
Yeah.
What do you take with you from this interview?
That you clearly have no idea what enduro is.
Yes, that's true.
That is
Thanks
true.
for that quick rundown.
You know, the thing that I would highlight about what I take in that privilege it felt to sit with Adrian was his connection to land. And there are a couple of ways this comes about for me. So I mentioned I had a couple of conversations with Adrian, and he didn't get a chance to speak to this in the podcast, but in one of my other conversations with him, he talked about how they select where to put trails on the land that's owned by his family based on what they observe in the land. So they watch what the land can sustain, and then they make the decision of, this is an area that a trail can exist and not have an impact beyond what we would hope for. So they kind of observe the land and make decisions about that. And then he was also, before we started recording, you heard him talking about the rain, and they had the race coming up, and he was really worried because it rains so much during the monsoons. He was worried that holding the race would destroy the land. And he was really worried about it. And they actually delayed the pre-ride and slowly opened up what trails were available for people that came out for the race based on what the land could sustain. And so in that way, when he talks about Rezduro and decisions made about the land, it makes me think, there's this connection to the land for him where you look around and you observe what's going on and you make decisions based on observation, not just decision on what do we want from the land. And now we'll go do that.
Gotcha.
And so but then secondly, and even more profoundly, when he described the logo and how in detail the logo actually outlines this connection, it's like within that circle is basically like kind of addressing ecology as a system. Like there are all these things that are interwoven and interact together. Water below the ground, it reminds me of the aquifer. And then the Black Mesa with the things that grow out of it, but the roots that are in it, and just the ecology of it. And I just thought, man, there's just a lot of connection to the land and awareness of the land in what Adrian has to share.
Yeah, that was a really neat moment during the interview as he was wearing the logo, right? And so he was able to sort of point to it as he was explaining the idea and the experience in it. That was a really neat moment. I thought for me, sitting with Adrian today, and just kind of what it felt like in the room, and I'd wonder if your experience felt similar, but the words radiant joy are kind of what comes across my mind.
Oh, yeah.
Is he just radiates joy. Like, it was just a real pleasure to sit with him and to learn and to hear his story and, just learning about what he's doing with TNA and the important work going down. There.
Yeah, and he brings an energy to it. And for sure, I would think joy is a part of that energy that I felt sitting with it. Because when he talks about it, it's less about like incriminating or speaking negatively about things. It's actually about what he's taking from it, what he's learned from it, what we all can grow from. It's like this joy in approaching things as they could be.
Totally. And it was like through this education and empowerment is kind of the words that jump into my mind for that as well. And in that, to me, it just seems like a deep connection to self and connection to his history and his family story, and all of that seems to be present in him as he goes through the world. Yeah,
so he had that connection to self piece, and through that connection to self, that's how he's able to radiate joy, despite tackling issues that may not bring joy.
Yeah, really difficult, tough topics with no quick solutions, it sounds like. When he was describing a lot of the process, it just sounded like there's a lot of bureaucratic stuff at play. Yeah.
Man, I don't think Adrian was too interested, but I'd love to ride bikes with him. I tried to talk him into it. I don't know how motivated he would be to spend time. It sounds like time's a rare commodity for him anyways.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hang out with him more.
Yeah. Such a just a joyful person to be around.
Yeah. Why don't you take us out by shouting us out?
No doubt. It's been a minute. You can always find us on the interwebs, www.beyondflag.com, flag spelled
FLG.
And we are always on IG, 5 days a week, 17 days a month, 14 days a year. Yeah.
14 days a year, 17 days a month and 14 days a year.
The math checks out.
Just doing a quick math check here.
Math checks out. Beyond underscore
8 minus the 7.
And then 2 zeros and then 14 days a year.
Yeah, okay.
Beyond underscore FLG. You can find we.
All right. Take care.
Lovies.
Has never come to mind.
Oh my gosh. Dude, how big are my eyeballs?
Your face. Dude. Your face is like,
oh!
What are you doing?
Dude.
I was unsure. Gosh. I was unsure if it would actually work.
Oh yeah, it worked, man. It's like climbing it's like increasing the shock. It's like we'll start him at this number and then just ramp it up while he's talking. Oh man. Great stuff.
Okay.
I think everyone will be very impressed by this moment.